Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to episode 74 of my Logic Pro 10 video tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to continue on mixing our song Living on the Run, and we're going to talk about offline automation today. We're just about done mixing this tune and getting ready for mastering. So one of the last things I want to show you is automation. Automation allows you to control a parameter across time on a track. So things like volume, pan, or plugin parameters. For example, in my drums here, there's a bit of a couple tom hits at the beginning here, and a bit of a tom fill here, and then there's another tom toward the middle of the tune. I want to bring out those fills where the toms are actually playing, but pull down the volume where the toms are not being utilized. So I'm not a big fan of completely muting out the rest of the track when the toms aren't being used, because those mics actually can add to the tone of the kit. But I definitely want to accentuate the tom fills when they're actually being used. So a way to do that is with automation. So to pull up automation on a track, you hit A on your keyboard, and what that does is it automatically enables the track that you have selected for automation. As you can see, it's sort of been grayed out, and there's this line on it. And you'll notice that the tom below it, doesn't have this. So what you have to do is enable automation for this track as well. The way you do this is that there's two ways to do it. You can click right here on this little enable automation icon. So we'll do the same thing down here. Or you can go over to your channel strip, and there'll be an automation tab that says read, and you can enable or disable this to do the same thing. By the way, there are other automation modes besides read. We'll talk about these in the next episode when we talk about live automation live automation. In this episode, we're purely talking about offline automation, which means that we're just going to use our mouse to draw in shapes and draw in volume changes. So what I'm going to do is create a breakpoint envelope. A breakpoint envelope is just a way for us to basically create a parameter change, create a value change. And it's really simple to do. All you do is you click on the line that shows up here when you enable automation on the track to create a point, and then we can create another point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this down. By the way, you can grab it right on the point itself, or you can grab on the line as well. So let me pull this down a bit. You can also choose to snap your points to grid lines. So if you go up to your snap mode up here and choose snap automation, your automation will snap to whatever your snap value is. So in my case, it's beat. So I can grab this point here, this automation point, snap it right to measure 10, and then I can snap this one to the third beat of measure 10. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to create 2 points, pull this over, and again, snap this one here, pull this one down significantly. There we go. I'm actually going to pull this up a hair, especially in this opening section. I really want to hear the toms come through. So let's just listen to this. You're just going to hear drums because I have the drum mix soloed. Now, if we go back and look at the mixer, you'll notice that the faders actually, oops, I didn't mean to pull that up. The faders on those tom tracks will actually follow the automation. Before I get too deep into automation, one thing I want you to be aware of is that you want to make sure to sort of get the levels in your mix where you want them before you start adding automation, because as soon as you add automation, the automation is going to trump any volume change you make to the fader. So if I go to try to pull up or down one of these tom tracks, the automation is automatically going to trump that, and then it's going to move the fader back to where it should be. So generally, as a general rule, what I do is I make sure that my main output is, I set it to unity gain, so it's just right at 0, and then I make sure that the overall output volume with all the instruments in is sitting roughly between -3 and -6 dB. If it clips a couple times just from some high transients, it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, optimally it shouldn't clip at all, but roughly, the overall loudness should be somewhere between about 3 and 6 dB. So real quick, let me just check that with all the instruments on.
To see the face of destruction, you ruin life,
So you can see we're actually a bit hot. We're coming in there a bit hot. So let me just grab everything, just select everything. And you want to start at the track level, not necessarily the master level. And let's pull this all down a hair. Now this automation is gonna, because we have automation on these tom tracks, the automation on those tracks is gonna sort of trump the volume changes we made, but that's okay for now. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and pull down my mix buses as well, just a hair. And let's see what this sounds like now. Yeah, that works. The reason why we're going to do that is we're leaving ourselves some headroom before we go into mastering. And one of the most common mistakes to make with automation is to not get your levels where you want them before adding automation. So automation ends up being one of the very last things I do with the mix. So let's go back to those toms. And actually, let me go ahead and solo out the drums. There we go. Let's go back to those toms. And I think they're okay the way they are. I really did want them to be a bit louder. But toward the middle here, toward the end of the chorus, there's a bit of a tom fill as well. So I want to go ahead and pull that in. A quick way to create automation, the way I always do it, is I don't work in snap mode, but I'll just create, like if I just want to pull up this one section, I'll just create 4 points around it, and then pull up sort of this little middle bar here, and it just pulls up the fill. So almost creating this little plateau effect. Something like that. There we go. Now, in a situation like this, you may go with something more like this, but you may want this sort of to arc a different way. You want this sort of, this automation fade to maybe be a bit more gradual, or maybe a little bit less gradual, especially if you're not creating a plateau. If you're just sort of, let me just delete this point. There we go. You can double click on automation points to make them go away as well. Another thing you can do is you can use the automation select tool to grab automation, to drag over it and hit delete, and it'll delete it. You can also drag over automation with this and move it around. And you can also hold Option to duplicate automation. So getting back to what I was saying before, maybe I want this slope here. Maybe I'm not using a plateau. Maybe I'm using this sort of slope. And I want this slope to be slower toward the top, but quicker toward the bottom of it. I want more of an arc, more of like a logarithmic or exponential arc. There's another additional tool that's called the Automation Curve tool. Automation Curve tool, let me just zoom out a bit there, or zoom in rather, allows us to grab any automation line and curve it up, down, and that's going to give us sort of a logarithmic or an exponential curve. And if you drag left and right, you'll get 2 S curves. So you can play around with that. I'm going to give this more of like an arced curve. There we go. Or something like that. And this one over here, I didn't want arced. There we go. Let's make this more, actually, let's make this more exponential. There we go. Let's see what that sounds like. Whoops. And you can see we're just pulling up those fills just where the fills are, and not using them elsewhere. So let me just pull up the mixer just so you can see that. See what that does to the faders. Here's our toms. And so they're just being used where they need to be used. All right, another spot I'm going to use some automation at is in the vocals. So let me just solo the lead vocal mix. There we go. And in the backing harmonies for the verses, there's a spot where I want it loud in one section and softer in another section, but I don't want to split this to two separate tracks. So we've got our lead vocal here, and we've got our backing harmony. Let me just solo these out, actually. There we go. Whoops, nope, these need to be soloed. Let me unsolo my bus over here. There we go. So let's just listen to this real quick. I apologize about the glitches. It's whenever I do it, as I've said before, whenever I try to do a screen capture, Logic bugs out on me. So let's try this again. There we go.
My child from me
And then there's this part.
that keeps me alive.
I want this keeps me alive part to be a lot louder than this part. I like the harmony here, but it's just a bit much. Over here, it's not quite loud enough. So what I can do is hit A to enable automation on the track. Create some points here. So what I'll do is I will pull up the automation just a hair here. And I'll pull down the level a bit here. So this is a perfect opportunity to use the automation select tool. So I'll go to automation select. Drag over this. By the way, this line right here, keeps me alive, is the same as this over here. So I'm just going to hold Option, duplicate this, and pull it over. Now, there's actually really nothing in between, so I didn't really have to do it that way. I just figured I'd show you how it can be used. Like maybe there was some vocals in here as well that we wanted to, not affect with the same little plateau effect. Honestly, what we could have just done was done this, just taken out these points and just let it sort of ring out there. Let's give that a shot.
Child from me, pray for death to take.
Then we've got our louder part here.
You're the only thing that keeps me alive.
There we go. The only other part I want to automate for this video is the guitar solo. So let me just go ahead and get to the guitar solo. At the tail end of the guitar solo, there's a bit of an ambient effect going on. Sounds like this. That ambient effect, I really want to pull that out about a bit. That was just part of a delay pedal I was using. So I really want to pull out that ambient effect. So we'll just hit A to pull up automation. If your display over here ever says off, you can just choose, you can click on it and you can go to main volume and you can adjust volume. But there's other things in here you can adjust as well. So I'll just say volume. And just on this last little bit here, I want to pull up the volume to hear that ambient effect a bit more. And it ends a bit abruptly there. We could use a regular fade, but I'm just going to go ahead and use an automation fade. A lot of people asked me about this when it came to software instruments. They weren't sure how to create fades with MIDI tracks. And when you have like a MIDI clip, the only way you can create a fade is this way. You sort of have to create it with automation. So there we go. All right, so this has just been automating volume with offline automation. In the next episode, I'll talk about live automation and being able to sort of play in the automation shapes in real time. And we'll also talk about automating other parameters other than volume. We'll talk about automating plugin parameters. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks again for watching.